Hey everyone! In today's video, we're taking you along with us to the Titanic Museum in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Greg and I visited this museum last fall during our road trip from Canada to Tennessee and back, and this was a great option for something to do on a rainy day in Pigeon Forge. Greg has always wanted to go to this museum, so we'll bring you along with us. This video will be unlike our others, as most of it will be photos with the odd video clips here and there, as some of the exhibits you can't take video. But we'll share the experience with you and some of the fascinating things that we learned or interactive things we could do, like walk up the different slants at the angles the ship sank at, put our hand in the 28-degree Fahrenheit, -2 degrees Celsius water to see how cold the water was, and more. So let's get into it.
Good morning, everyone. We are in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee still this morning. We just checked out of our resort at Dollywood, the Heart Song. We are going to the Titanic Museum this morning. For Gregory here, who's very excited to see the Titanic Museum. We'll explain everything that we see and share it with you today. And it'll be interesting to learn more about the Titanic. So I'm from Nova Scotia and Halifax. There's a Titanic Museum at the Maritime Museum at the Atlantic, as Halifax is the city that helped recover the bodies from the Titanic because it sunk offshore of Nova Scotia and Newfoundland in Canada. Halifax was part of the rescue mission, but for whatever reason, our museum is a little sad. So it's really strange to me that there is a huge Titanic museum in Tennessee, but it's going to be really fun to see out this museum. I don't want to say enjoy this museum. I was going to say enjoy this museum, but that seems wrong. It'll be an educational experience. So,
why?
Because it's sad.
Why?
Because people died, Gregory. Because the ship sunk. Thought he was gonna say why again. Pigeon Forge, you're definitely unique. Oh, alrighty.
So quickly, some information about this museum. Depending on what time of year you go, this museum can be very busy in peak tourist season, so it's recommended to buy your tickets in advance online for the time you want to go. As of making this video, ticket prices could fluctuate by day, but are approximately around a whopping $40 per person. When you get there, you're giving a boarding pass of a real Titanic passenger to learn about. Greg and I each got one, and at the end of the museum, you'll be able to look up the name of your passenger to see if the passengers whose names you helped had survived or perished on the Titanic.
Oh, you're first class?
I'm first class. What are you?
From Toronto, Ontario, and 52.
Oh, you're from Canada?
The entire first floor you're not able to take photos or video, but once you get to the famous giant staircase that we all recognize, you're able to in here. This is a $1 million exact replica of the Titanic staircase. The staircase was built using the Titanic's official blueprints and is full scale. There was a museum representative here explaining how they had woodworkers crafting the oak carvings to make it an exact replica. There are more replica rooms to see throughout the museum as well. For example, here's a first-class parlor suite with what a first-class place setting would have looked like, and the style of dresses from the time period. Then you get to walk down the first-class hallway as though you are right there on the Titanic. It's the real artifacts that you aren't able to take video of, as they belong to collectors, so keep that in mind if you're visiting. But you can take photos as long as you are past the first floor, which is mostly a huge artifact collection. This room has a tribute to the band on board the Titanic, as none of the band members survived the sinking. In this room, you'll also be able to see a real life jacket from the Titanic, as well as a real letter from the captain of the Titanic, Captain Edward J. Smith, to his daughter. Next up is the bridge. Here is where we'll learn more about the captain and some of the crew's perspective of the ship and what had happened. This was supposed to be Captain Smith's final voyage before retirement after working with the White Star Line for 26 years. Next up, right outside the bridge, and possibly the most popular of attractions here at the museum. This is where you can put your hand in the 28° Fahrenheit, -2°C water to truly get to see how cold the waters were that night on April 15th, 1912.
Oh, that's starting to hurt. Oh, that's not good. Oh,
how many seconds did you make
I
it?
don't know.
That is colder than I could have ever imagined.
Oh,
it hurts. It hurts.
Oh,
Let's just say putting your hand in the ice-cold water is truly a humbling and somber experience that really puts things into perspective why there were so many casualties of the ship sinking. Another humbling experience would be to test out the sloping degrees. This will give you the opportunity to test out walking on mini replicas of the Titanic's deck at various angles as it would have sank, so you can see how hard it was for the passengers on board. And to remember, our soles on our shoes nowadays are very different too, as they probably had slippery leather soles back then, and parts of the deck would have already been wet. Also in this room is a replica of the lifeboats to sit in. There's also an interactive area to learn about and practice Morse code. The museum is very much laid out as a story, and once you experience the interactive exhibits we showed you about the sinking of the Titanic, there's information on the ship Carpathia that answered the Titanic's distress signal but was 58 miles away. They had rescued the Titanic survivors from the lifeboats as they arrived where the Titanic had sunk by 4 a.m. while the Titanic had sunk around 2:20 a.m. There are also some genuine artifacts in this room recovered from the Titanic. For example, there's a set of first-class keys, a trunk that belonged to a passenger on the Titanic that they found floating in the Atlantic Ocean. The handle of this purse that you see here is one of the items found inside the trunk that was floating. This wooden cross was made by a recovery crew member who found some oak wood from the Titanic floating in the ocean. There are also some interactive areas for kids to learn more about the Titanic. Greg really enjoyed an interactive activity that was navigating around the dive of the Titanic and seeing what it looks like underwater. There's also an exhibit to honor the children of the Titanic with all of their names recognized and what class they were in. If the passenger you were assigned on your boarding pass when you paid for admission is a child, there's a tree where you can honor their name. In this next room is where you'll see all of the names of the passengers of the Titanic, with the class they were in and ultimately what their fate was. This is where you can take the boarding pass of the passenger you were given at the beginning of your tour and find out their story and find their name on the wall. The Titanic had 2,240 passengers and only 706 people survived the disaster. Somehow, Greg and I both had passenger names that survived. Mine was Ruth Dodge, a first-class passenger, and Greg also had a first-class passenger, Major Arthur Pigeon. There's also a wall filled with the survivors' stories and how they carried on with their lives after the Titanic. In the next room, you can see a 26-foot-long Lego Titanic replica made up of 56,000 Legos. The Titanic was discovered on September 1st, 1985, and the final area of the museum is about discovering the Titanic and dive teams and expeditions since. This area even includes a newly added memorial for the Oceangate Submersible and its victims, as the Titanic had claimed the lives of 5 more people over 100 years later in 2023. John Jocelyn is the owner of this museum in Pigeon Forge. He's been to the wreck of the Titanic 32 times and shares his expedition outfit and many great photos of the Titanic from his expedition there in 1987. The final exhibit exits into the grand staircase area that we showed you earlier. Throughout this tour, you also have a personal audio machine to explain exhibits to you as you go, and there are signs along the way for both kid and adult audible tours. As with any tourist attraction, this one ends in a gift shop. In this gift shop, you'll find anything Titanic related you could possibly want to find, including White Star lined dishes, mugs and clothes, and of course, replicas of the Heart of the Ocean necklace that is so famous in the Titanic movies.
Greg, what did you think of the Titanic Museum?
That was good.
Yeah.
Yep.
Would you recommend?
I would.
Yes. Very sad. Our passengers did survive. Oops, I fell. So that was nice, but they were both first class passengers, so that probably helped. It's a rainy day and there's a bus tour here now. We probably made it, what, 6 seconds in the water or less?
It's like 10-15, but man, it was hurting.
It was hurting. Like, it really puts it into perspective when you put your hand in the tank, because my hands were still tingling afterwards from being so cold. So to have your full body immersed in that is just sickening to think about. But the Titanic Museum here, I do have to say, was a lot better than the one in Halifax. I think Halifax really missed the opportunity on this one, but it was very interesting. As you saw in photos, there were artifacts from the Titanic. There was information about all the passengers, their stories, and what their history was before the Titanic, or if they made it past the sailing, what the rest of their history was after life after the Titanic. It was really sad, but it was also really informative and put things into perspective big time. I do want to add that for being a museum, it was more expensive than we anticipated it to be. It was $39 per adult, so take that into consideration if you do want to go to this museum. But it was really interesting and the perfect thing to do in Pigeon Forge on a rainy day when the weather's not so nice.
Well, there you have it, our adventures to the Titanic Museum Experience in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. If you enjoyed this video, we would greatly appreciate if you would hit the like button and subscribe to follow along on our next adventure. This day was part of our USA road trip adventures from Canada to Tennessee and back. Check out our channel if you want to see our other adventures along the way, such as our time at Hershey Park in Pennsylvania, then our adventures in Dollywood, also in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. We also had a lot of fun in Nashville during our Tennessee visit, and we can't forget our stop on the way home to Salem, Massachusetts for some spooky witchy fun. Thanks for watching.